In this chapter of challenges of the nation building, we'll discuss the events which stood as a challenge in the path of nation building. But for the time being, we'll discuss only those challenges which the country had to face since independence, that is year 1947 up to 1956. Moment the world independence reaches our ears, the famous lines of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, traced with destiny, they come to our mind. These lines were the part of the maiden speech of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, which he delivered on the night falling between 14th and 15th of August 1947 in the Parliament House before the Constituent Assembly. But just before this speech, he had hoisted the tricolor flag in the central hall of Parliament House itself. The next ceremony of the flag hoisting occurred at India Gate in the morning on 15th of August. On this day itself, Lord Mountbatten swore in Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru as the first Prime Minister of independent India. In this series of flag hoisting, the next program was on 16th of August in the morning at Red Fort, where Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru also addressed a cheerful crowd over there who was waiting for Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru at the grounds of Red Fort. Now, when we are talking about Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, let's also discuss the approach of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru for the nation building and his contribution in this context. His contribution, that is contribution of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru for the nation building is immeasurable. He was a visionary and a modernist who emphasized that the foundation of a strong nation can be laid on the basis of democracy, secularism, oneness, and feeling, that is fearless feeling of the citizens. In the era of post-World War II, the reconstruction of divided and worn out India was not an easy task. The policies like 5-year plan happened due to the far-sightedness of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and its effects, or rather we can say its good effects, we can feel even today. The heavy-duty projects like Bhakra Dam and the Hirapur Dam, they became possible due to the efforts of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Not only this, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was also in the favor of modernization of the industry, and for the same purpose, a huge amount was allocated to the industrial sector in the second 5-year plan, that is around 18.5% was allocated to this sector. In addition, a committee was constituted under the leadership of P.C. Mahalanobis, a great statistician and a man known as the architect of Planning Commission. And this committee constituted of a large number of planners, economists, and the aim was to bring about a structural transformation in the field of industrial sector. Who can forget the nuclear programs for peaceful purposes started under the leadership of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and under the guidance of Dr. Homi Bhabha. To summarize, we can say that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was the architect of today's modern India would not be an exaggeration. This time, When we are talked about the approach of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru for the nation building and his contribution in this context, let's come back to our main topic, that the challenges the country had to face after independence till 1956. And in this context, we are going to take up firstly the series of 5 challenges the country had to face immediately after the independence. Let's count them. Number 1, to keep the people united who were together so far in spite of their different, we can say, religions, language, and culture, because their goal was common. That is, they had a common goal of making India free from the clutches of colonial rule. The second was to establish a democratic form of government in the country. And the third was to uplift the standard of the common people and to ensure that no one is deprived of the social justice, especially the poor and the disadvantaged group. Fourth was to uplift the economic condition of the country, which had gone down due to the continuous tapping of the resources of India by the British government. In the last, but not in the least, the fifth challenge was unnecessarily imposed on India, and that was the resettlement of millions of the refugees who had come from Pakistan. What was the story of partition? Let's have a look over that one also. Actually, around 5 or 6 years prior to independence, the founder of Muslim League, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he suggested a two-nation theory to the Congress, which Congress totally rejected. But to fulfill his political aspirations, Muhammad Ali Jinnah presented the same theory before the British government, and for some unknown reasons, they immediately accepted and decided to divide Indian region on the basis of concentration of communities. Now we know this concentration of Muslim was either in the east of the Indian region or on the west of the Indian region, and there was no land connectivity between the two. Still, it was decided by the British government that Indian region would be divided into two countries, that is India and Pakistan, with Pakistan having two parts, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Up to this, even it was tolerable. But the problem was with two provinces, Punjab and Bengal, where there was the mixed population of Hindus and Muslims. So it was decided by the British government that these areas will be bifurcated at district level or still lower level in such a manner that the areas concentrated with Hindus will be associated with India and the areas concentrated with Muslims will be associated with Pakistan. But implementation to this decision was not taken even up to 14th of August 1947. The result was that there was a lot of confusion among the people living in these areas, and people had to vacate their houses just at a notice of few hours. People took whatever mode of transport they could, but majority of the people had to move miles and miles just on foot. On the way, people were looted, murdered. The situation was horrible and the result was terrifying. Let's discuss the consequences of the partition one by one. First one, such a large number of transfer of people happened for the first time in the history of humanity. Number two, people of one community were openly killing the people of the other community. Third was, the border cities like Lahore, Amritsar and Calcutta in the east were the main sites of communal riots, where the looting, arson and murder were taking place in the broad daylight. People had to vacate their houses just at a notice of ours, where they or their ancestors had been living for years and years. People took whatever mode of transport they could. But as just we have told you, that majority of the people had to cover the miles and miles on foot, which included the small children, the women, and senior people. The sixth one is that people they were looted and murdered on the way, and the worst affected were the women or the females who were raped, kidnapped, and were forced to convert the religion. Seventh one, many of the people, for the sake of family honor, killed the females of their own family. And 80 lakh people were transferred from one place to the other, and in all, around 8 lakh people were killed. And in the refugees camps, people had to live a very hard life. From the Indian side, the Hindu organizations like Hindu Mahasabha, they started pressurizing the government to announce India to be the Hindu nation. Rumors were coming from the border that Hindus in the Pakistan, especially the women, they are being treated in an inhuman way. Hindu organizations, taking the advantage of rumors, took full advantage of the sentiments of the Hindus, and as a result, protests and demonstrations they started taking place all over India. And pressure was being built up on the Indian government to declare India as a Hindu nation. But the positive side of this story of partition is that in spite of many of the Muslims leaving India and going to Pakistan, still there were a very large number of Muslims who, showing the trust on Indian government, decided to stay in India itself. This number was around 12% of the then total population of 35 crores. That is around 4 crores of the Muslims, showing faith and trust on the Indian government, decided that they will stay in India itself. Indian government also, honoring the trust of these Muslims, decided and declared that India will follow the policy of secularism, where every person will have the right and the choice to adopt and celebrate the religion of his choice. With this declaration of the Indian government, the doubt, the confusion, or the problem of Muslims staying in India was almost over. But now we'll see the problem the refugees faced who came from Pakistan. The first and the foremost need of these refugees was food, shelter, medicines, and sanitation. Also, they had to come out from the tension of being homeless and trauma of losing their homes. In addition, they had to mold themselves according to the present environment. Also, this year, due to the excess monsoon, there was a situation of flood in the country. So the refugees staying in these camps, they had to face epidemics like cholera, dysentery, typhoid, smallpox, etc. But Indian Red Cross and British Red Cross, they have to be appreciated for their role, and they went to the refugees camp and helped the sick people over there a lot. Now, the Indian Red Cross could continue its medical services in India. For this, British Red Cross not only provided the Indian Red Cross with the big cash amount, but also donated them a fleet of 12 ambulances. Now, the refugees who came from Pakistan entered the border from three places: one, northern border, western border, and eastern border. The refugees who entered India from the northern border, most of them they took shelter in the different cities of Punjab. In Punjab, Indian government had established two big refugees camp, one at Jalandhar and the other in Kurukshetra. At that time, Haryana was not in existence, so Kurukshetra was a part of Punjab. Also, the other refugees, some of the refugees, they also moved to Delhi. Now, these refugees who had entered India from the northern border, most of them they were farmers and now they needed the land for cultivation. On the other side, even the government was in possession of many of the pieces of land which got vacated due to the many of the Muslims leaving India and going to Pakistan. So these pieces of land they were distributed among the refugees so that they could cultivate the land and could have a source of income or source of livelihood and they could feed their families. This way, some of the problem of the refugees of resettlement had got resolved. The refugees which had moved to Delhi, initially they lived in the refugee camps, but with the passage of time, though small, but they were allotted the pakka houses. In this context, two resettlement colonies, they were very famous in those days. One is Old Rajinder Nagar, that was near Karol Bagh area of Delhi, and the second was Kingsway Camp, which is today known as GTB Nagar or Guru Tegh Bahadur Nagar. This Kingsway Camp resettlement colony was spread in a very large area of around 5 to 6 square kilometer and was divided into many segments. Now the refugees who came to Delhi, most of them were Punjabis, and due to their amiable nature, they could absorb themselves or adjust themselves with the locals, and with their talent and ability, they could establish the sources of their livelihood and problem of their resettlement was also over. The refugees who entered from the western border, they were Sindhis. After entering into India, they had to come across Gujaratis and Marathis. They were speaking different language. So these refugees, they got some problem initially, but later they too, due to their talent and ability, they could also establish the sources of their livelihood and they were able to feed their families. But the refugees who entered the border from the eastern side, they had a little different type of problem. And the problem was that these refugees, when they entered India, the locals over there, they were not able to absorb them. The thinking of the locals was that the resources available over there, maybe employment or the other material resources, they will have to share with them. But this mentality of the locals, that remained only for a short period and later on even the things were normal. After this, when we have discussed the problems of the refugees and how their resettlement could take place, that problem was over. Now we are taking up the next challenge, and that is the merger of the princely states with India. The British Indian region can be divided into two parts. The Indian provinces, which were occupied in around 75% of the area, and princely states, which were occupied in the 25% of the area. Now, these Indian provinces, they were directly under the control of the British government. But for princely states, the rulers had the full power to decide or take decision in the internal matters of the state as long as they had accepted the supremacy of the British government. Now, the acceptance of the supremacy of the British government by the princely states was called paramountcy or suzerainty. Now, after dividing Indian region into Pakistan and India, British government declared that with the end of the British rule in the Indian region, the supremacy of the princely states stands lapsed. That is, now it is the liberty for them. They want to go with Pakistan, they want to go with India, or if they want, even they can remain independent. With this declaration of the British government, first reaction came from state of Travancore, who declared to remain independent. The next day, same type of statement came from state of Hyderabad, followed by state of Jammu and Kashmir and state of Bhopal. And in all, there were 11 such states which declared that they would like to remain independent. This was a shocking news for the Indian leaders who had seen the dream of united India. Now, this duty was assigned to the then Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel to take up the issue with the rulers of the state and convince them to become a part of India. Now, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel took the issue with the rulers of the state and tried to convince them to become a part of India on the basis of these three following points. Number one, the citizens of your state, they are willing that your state should become a part of India. So, honoring these sentiments or feelings of your citizens, your state must become a part of India. And the second was, if your state becomes a part of India, then Indian government can consider the autonomy of some of the portion of your state. And in addition, the state would be getting some privy purses which will include an annual cash installment from the Indian Treasury. And third was, giving the example of the partition of India, they were made to understand the importance of the boundaries. And they were told how, if you become a part of India, then the safety of your boundaries will be the duty of the Indian government or the Indian army. Though it looked very simple, but it was the convincing ability and the diplomatic strategy of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel that by 14th of August 1947, almost all the states they had agreed to be a part of India. That is, they had signed the instrument of accession. A written agreement between the Indian Union and the ruler of the state, where the ruler of the state gives the consent that he is willing to become a part of India, is called the instrument of accession. For 4 states, Indian government found some difficulty in making them merge with India, and these 4 states were state of Hyderabad, Manipur, Jammu and Kashmir, and state of Junagadh. Now let us see the story of Hyderabad, how it got merged into India. In the British India or the British Indian region, there were in all, big or small, 565 states, and out of them, Hyderabad was the biggest. Its ruler was called Nizam. Nizam at that time was the richest person of the world. At the time of merger, means we are talking about 1947, at that time, Nizam of Hyderabad was Mir Usman Ali Khan. Now, a standstill agreement was made between the Indian Union and the Hyderabad state for a year with the conditions that talks will keep on going or the negotiations will keep on going. In the meantime, the farmers or the peasants who were the victims of the oppressive rule of Nizam, they started a protest against the Nizam. large number of women, they also joined this protest. But after the Hyderabad Congress and the Communist Party who entered into this movement or the protest, it gained momentum. Now, Nizam gave the duty of suppressing this agitation or the movement to his personal army called Razakars, who were very famous for their cruelty, murder, raping, maiming, and looting, etc., especially for the non-Muslims. Now, after the entry of Razakars, the incidents of violence started taking place from both the sides, and with the passage of time, the number of incidents they started increasing, and there was a tension in the area, especially in the Hyderabad town. Indian government, who was keeping an eye over the situation, ordered the Indian army to take control of the situation. Indian army took the position. Now, for many days, there was an intermittent firing between the Indian army and the Razakars. But ultimately or finally, Nizam surrendered before the government or the Indian government and signed the instrument of accession in September 1948, and Hyderabad became a part of India. Now let's talk of the story how Manipur became a part of India. Giving the assurance of internal autonomy, King Bodh Chandra Singh of Manipur was convinced or was made to agree to sign the instrument of accession. But in the meantime, there was a pressure from the public, and King Bodh Chandra Singh had to declare the elections in the state. Elections happened, and Manipur became that part of free India where the elections took place under the universal adult franchise pattern and became the democratic monarch. Now, in the Manipur assembly, regarding merger, there were the mixed voices. On one side, the Manipur Congress wanted merger with India, while the other parties, they were against the merger. But ultimately, one day, King Bodh Chandra Singh signed the instrument of accession without taking the permission of the Manipur assembly. Though there was annoyance and anger among the public, but the things cooled down, and ultimately Manipur became the part of India in September 1949. After this, we are going to talk about the merger of Kashmir in India. And in this discussion, we'll also see that how the birth of Kashmir issue took place. Actually, the wait and watch policy of the ruler of Kashmir gave birth to the Kashmir issue, which became a point of conflict between India and Pakistan. Pakistan tried its best to link China with this issue as well. All these things, or the proof of all these things, will be very clear in the coming part of the discussion. The ruler of Kashmir, Raja Hari Singh, was a king with Hindu mentality. He belonged to Dogra dynasty, and the first king of the Dogra dynasty was Raja Gulab Singh. Though there was a majority of Muslims in the state, but they were being treated as a second-class citizens. In this context, many times the Muslims, they raised their voices, but their voices were suppressed by the rulers. But in 1931, there was an uprising from the Muslim intellectuals under the leadership of Sheikh Abdullah. But for this, he was sent behind bars. The Sheikh Abdullah today even is known as the Sher-e Kashmir, who was the father of ex-CM Farooq Abdullah and grandfather of another ex-CM Omar Abdullah. Geographically, Kashmir was closer to Pakistan in comparison to India, and the reason was that Jammu city of Kashmir and Sialkot city of Pakistan, they were linked together both by rail and road. Though the ruler of Kashmir, I'm talking about Raja Hari Singh, was neither interested in merger with India or with Pakistan, though reasons were different. With India, he didn't want to have the merger because after independence, India was going to become a democratic country where his monarchy was not going to last for a long time. On the other side, he didn't want merger with Pakistan because Pakistan was a country with Muslim dominance and he was a man with Hindu mentality. Initially, Indian government made its best efforts to convince Raja Hari Singh to have a merger with India. But after the passiveness of Raja Hari Singh, Indian government withdrew and left the issue totally. Now the only option left with Kashmir or Raja Hari Singh was to have a merger with Pakistan. So he made a standstill agreement with Pakistan, and this is the time of around 12th of August 1947, that is 3 days prior to the independence of India or 2 days prior to the independence of Pakistan. But within a time of 15 days, Pakistan government started pressurizing Raja Hari Singh for the full merger or otherwise face the consequences. Raja Hari Singh was a little worried after the threat of Pakistani government, and Pakistan government, to honor its threat, infiltrated a troop of 2,000 Pakistani army men from the Muzaffarabad city of Kashmir, and intentionally they were sent in the disguise of a tribal people. And listen carefully, this is the story of 22nd of October 1947. The Kashmir army, it totally failed to stop the Pakistani army men. Now the Pakistan army men, they started approaching ahead, and within a time of 2 days, they could capture two famous areas of Kashmir, that is Uri and Baramulla. When this news reached Raja Hari Singh, he was in panic. He immediately contacted Indian government and requested for the military help. And within a time of a day or two, he signed the instrument of accession on 26th of October 1947, that is just 2 days after getting the news of the capture of Uri and Baramulla. Indian government too, immediately on the same day, that is 26th of October 1947, airlifted the Indian army and made it to reach Kashmir and asked them to start their job. Indian army started moving ahead for the job assigned to them, and within a few days they started pushing the Pakistani army back, and they could capture back, they could took back the control of Uri and Baramulla. This was a big success for the Indian army, and Indian army was going on ahead in its mission of success. But in the meantime, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 1st of January 1948, he went to the United Nations and asked for the mediation. Now with the entry of United Nations, now the Indian army was handicapped. They had to stop the war or the fight, and up to whatever area they could capture came under the control of India, and the rest of the portion was called Pakistani occupied Kashmir or Azad Kashmir. Now the Kashmiri Muslims living on the Indian side, they never wanted to go with Pakistan, but the Kashmiri separatists, They always took the advantage of the innocence of these Kashmiri, especially the youth over there, and by baiting them, they could always kept on solving their selfish motives. For the Pakistani leaders, this Kashmir issue is nothing more than a subject of befooling their public. Entering, or we can say infiltrating the terrorist and creating disturbance in India has become the sole motive of Pakistan. In this context, three wars have occurred between India and Pakistan in 1965, in 1971, and the Kargil War. And in one of the wars, that is 1971, Pakistan had to even leave one of its part, which ultimately became Bangladesh. But still Pakistan has not learnt even a single lesson from these things. Now after this, we are going to discuss that of the total part of Kashmir, how much is under the control of India, Pakistan and China, and out of the total population of Kashmir, how much is living in that area which is under the control of India or under the control of Pakistan or under the control of China. For this, you can have a look on the table which you can find on the screen. As clear from the table, we have shown a population of 0% against China, which is having a control of 20%. The reason is that the area which is under the control of China is either covered with snow or a deep forest or a place where human living is not possible. And if some people are living over there, they might be in a few hundred or maximum just 2 or 3,000 or so. But in this 20% of the area which is under the control of China, it also includes an area of 5,200 square kilometers which was gifted to China by Pakistan in 1963 by the then President Ayub Khan. After this, we are almost at the end of the merger of the states with India. But once we discuss the merger of states and we don't discuss in detail about the personality of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel will not be a justification. To have a merger of more than 500 states in India was not an easy task. Perhaps that was the reason that this duty was assigned to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was the Home Minister. Plus, he was also having the designation of Deputy Prime Minister. And as we have discussed earlier, perhaps it was due to the convincing ability and the diplomatic strategy, which included the force and the money and the all other means by which it was possible for Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel to make all these states merge with India before 14th of August 1947. Now, in the case of Kashmir, though even we can say that 4 states they had shown some stiffness in merging with India, and Sardar Vallabhbhai dealt with them firmly and ultimately they also agreed to become a part of India. In case of Kashmir, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel right from the beginning was in favor of the use of force to make Kashmir merge with India. But he didn't get the support of the other leaders, which perhaps also included Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And had the other leaders, including Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, agreed to what Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel wanted, perhaps the Kashmir issue would not have been the tension for India. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel basically emerged as a strong freedom fighter leader after the incidents of 2 satyagrahas, one 1918 satyagraha of Kheda and the second was 1928 satyagraha of Bardoli. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel possessed qualities like a nationalist, a catalyst, and a realist, and for this reason he was called the NCR of Indian politics. Now, after this, when we have talked about the merger and the personality of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, we can take up the second or the next challenge, and that was the reorganization of the states. In 1920 Congress session of Nagpur, it was agreed in principle that after independence, the states would be reorganized on the basis of linguistic plurality. But after the incidence of partition, the leaders, or we can say the central leaders, they were afraid that if we reorganize the states on the basis of linguistic plurality, may not lead to division, disruption, and disintegration. Afraid of this, the central leaders decided to put the issue of reorganization of the states on hold. That is, they decided to postpone this issue. During this time only, a Vishal Andhra movement protest was going on. A movement was going on by the Telugu people who were demanding a separate state for Telugu speaking people. When they knew about the decision of the central government putting off reorganization issue on hold, it provoked the protesters and acted as a vaccination for this movement. A famous Congress leader and a veteran Gandhian, Poti Shanamulu, he declared to go on indefinite fast. Because of the passiveness of the Indian government and not paying any heed in this regard, after 56 days, Poti Shanamulu died. After the death of Poti Shanamulu, there was an unrest in the movement. Many of the local MLAs, they resigned in support of this movement. Now this protest was on the streets. The violent incidents, they started taking place. To suppress the violence, the local police, they opened fire on the protesters, which resulted in the killing of many of the people. Now the situation went from bad to worse. Indian government was having an eye now at the situation, and finding the graveness of the situation, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in December 52, he announced that the Indian government is ready to accept the demand of the separate state for the Telugu speaking people, and consequently in October 1953, Andhra Pradesh came into being. After this incident, the people started raising their voice for reorganization of the states, and even the government, honoring the sentiments of the people, they constituted State Reorganization Commission under the leadership of CJI, Chief Justice of India, who was retired, Fazal Ali, and then duty was assigned to reorganize the states. This commission, they submitted its report in 1956, and on these recommendations, making a 1956 Act, country was divided into 14 states and 6 union territories. No doubt, country got divided into 14 states and 6 union territories on the basis of linguistic plurality. But at least there were 2 states where the people with 2 different languages were living over there. A first example is the Bombay state, where people speaking Gujarati and Marathi, they were living in the same state. So its result came within 4 years of the reorganization that Bombay state had to be cut into 2 parts, that is Gujarat and Maharashtra. Second example in this case is of Punjab, where there were 2 communities speaking 2 different languages, that is Punjabi and Haryanvi. and hence a small portion had to be carved out from Punjab and was called Haryana. Same way, for different reasons, maybe geographical reasons, administrative reasons, or political reasons, more and more states kept carving from the original states, and hence the number of states kept on increasing. The number of states not only increased due to carving out of the state from the main state. There are examples when some of the UTs or the union territories, they were promoted to the level of state, and such three examples are Himachal Pradesh, Tripura and Manipur. So now we can say that with the passage of time due to the carving out or the permission of the UTs to states, the number of states kept on increasing, and today, that is by 2021, in all there are 28 states and 8 union territories. Here we want to give you very important information, and that is, as we said that with the passage of time, the number of states kept on increasing due to carving out of the more state from the main state or promotion of the UTs to state level. But there is one example where one state was totally erased. There is the exception, and this is the example of Jammu and Kashmir. That is in 2019, after the repealing of 370, Jammu and Kashmir was erased and was divided into two parts, Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, and both these parts, they were given the designation of union territories. And you can confirm this thing in the list of 28 states and 8 union territories, that you will not find the name of Jammu Kashmir in the list of state. Rather, you will find the name of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh in the list of union territories. With this, we come to the end of the reorganization, but at the end of the chapter, we are going to see that how the language conflict can be such a big issue that it can stir up the power corridors. After independence, which language would be the official language? Regarding this, there was an exhaustive and divisive argument or debate between the or among the makers of the constitution, not reaching to the conclusion by unanimously. Then it was decided by majority and after the opinion of the representatives of the British government, that is after the adoption of constitution for 15 years, the English will continue as the associate language, after which the Hindi could be fully used as the official language for India. Now we know that our constitution was adopted on 26th January 1950. So after 26th January 1965, Hindi was fully going to become the official language of the country. This was not accepted by the people of the non-Hindi states, and they wanted that English should continue as the official language. DMK, a political party of Madras, today's Tamil Nadu, they alleged the government that the Hindi is being imposed on them unnecessarily. Watching the doubts and the tension of the non-Hindi speaking states, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru made some change in the provisions of this Hindi language, but DMK was not satisfied. As the day 26 January 1965 was approaching, after which Hindi was going to be fully the official language of the country, anti-Hindi protests, they started taking place in the Madras province, in the Madras state. In Madurai, a city of Madras, again I am telling it is today's Tamil Nadu. So in the Madurai city of Madras, a big clash occurred between the anti-Hindi protesters and Congress workers. After this incident, the protest they spread in whole of the state of Madras. The incidents of violence started taking place. Initially, to suppress the violence, government lathi charged the protesters, but later opened the fire, which again resulted in the killing of the many of the protesters. Again, the same thing occurred, that the situation started moving from bad to worse. Looking into the graveness of the situation, the then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri assured the protesters that unless they are willing, Hindi will not be imposed on them. With this assurance, the protest or the agitation they started slowing down. But one political effect was seen, and that was that in the 1969 assembly elections, the DMK party got majority in the assembly elections of its own. And till now, Congress never could form the government in the Madras assembly of its own. No doubt, the regional parties do take the advantage of the sentiments of the people. But now even the central government, they have become aware of the things, and they never impose any language over the regions or over the state or the state governments. Rather, after the requirement or the desire of the regions or the state governments, they add on some more language as the official language in addition to the language which is already being used over there. In this context, there is one latest example, and that is after the repealing of 370 in 2019, Government of India brought a bill in the parliament named Jammu and Kashmir Official Bill 2020, and according to the provision of this bill, 3 more languages were given the recognition as the official language in addition to the 2 languages already being used officially, that is Urdu and English. These 3 languages who were recognized as the official languages as per this bill were Kashmiri, Dogri and Hindi. With this, we come to the end of this chapter, and let me tell you, as usual, the questions given at the end of the book, you can have them in the question answer form. You can have question and answers of the film Garam Hawa, and in addition, more question and answers related to the inside content. You can have them from our previous video of the same chapter. But as we know that in the first term, which is going to occur in around November and December, the pattern of the question paper will be MCQ. So, the sample question paper on this pattern will be released at least 20 days prior to the announcement of the date of your this first term exam. The moment we upload this sample question paper, other videos of the other chapters with the latest syllabus, you get the information immediately. For that, you do subscribe our channel, that is press the bell icon and get connected to our channel. Thank you.